Hello guys, and welcome back to Phat Pack Magic, where we've got the Pioneer coverage you've been craving for. Now, on the right we've got Vince, who's the king of the hill of this feature match area, and he's running Bant Company. And on the left we've got Zach Summer. He's the challenger and he wants the gauntlet to be thrown down, but he's going to be starting off his play with 2 cards less than 7. Yeah, he took a mulligan to 5, but he's running Lotus Storm. Now this deck is pretty great. It's a critical mass style deck, and he's got access to plenty of card draw. But he starts off with a forest and passes the turn, as Vince starts off with his own forest and plays out an Elvish Mystic. Zach draws for turn and plays out a Thespian Sage, a critical key to his deck in being able to copy those Lotus Fields. Vince is taking a look at the Thespian Sage, maybe reading the flavor text, and takes his turn. Now, it looks like he's deciding on how he wants to angle this deck. He's not too sure about what Zach has going on. Thespian Stage kind of looks like a newbie card. It doesn't look too impressive until you actually see it work. But Zach draws and passes the turn back, and Vince, sensing blood in the water, drops a Wild One Preserver, which is a 2/2 with Flash, and now he's going to be able to start doing some real magic with this creature. This Thrones of Eldraine creature says when a non-human enters play, you can pump it by X mana, and that X equals 3, as he comes in crashing at Zach's face, bringing him down to 15. Zach taking 2 damage, playing out a Breeding Pool. He needs that blue mana, and he needs it now. Vince is threatening 2-turn lethal, because those elves can start swinging in as well. Zach starts digging. He's got a Shimmer of Possibility, a Sorcery Speed Impulse, and he's trying to decide whether or not he can afford a blocker, but he decides on the Lotus Field. He needs to get those lands down, and he needs to get them down fast. Unfortunately, that's all he can do this turn, and he passes it back to Vince. Vince draws for turn. He plays a land tapped. Yeah, it looks like he's gonna play it tapped. Yep, it's tapped. And now he's going to crash in for 6, and this brings Zach down to 7, meaning that he's got 1 turn to culminate some kind of interaction, some kind of blockers, some kind of way to get through. And he at least has his land drop for the turn. Plays out a forest. Now, unfortunately, Vince is threatening lethal, and Zach doesn't want to give away too much information about how his deck works, and concedes the game to Vince, and Vince takes this game way fast and didn't have to show too much of his deck either. He's got Elvish Mystics and Wild One Preservers. That's what Zach knows. But we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Hey guys, I want to give a quick shout out here to Your Playmat. These guys offer fully customizable playmats, card sleeves, and foil playmats. Now, I wouldn't be talking to you guys about these mats unless I personally believed in them. So check this out. Yeah, that is the Mox Jet Altar on the Phat Pack Magic draft videos, and we put that on a mat. And here's the best part. Your playmat believes in me and believes in my channel, and therefore believes in you guys. So that's why they're doing a special discount code only for Phat Pack Magic YouTube subscribers. Put in the code PPM15 and get 15% off any playmat you order. Foil, regular, anything you're looking for. PPM 15. So what are you guys waiting for? Go make your own mat and show off your style. This time, it's Vince's turn to take a mulligan, and Zach is pretty happy-pappy with his hand. Vince was pretty fortunate in the previous game not having to show off too much of what he's doing, because, like, Wild One Preserver doesn't seem like a very flashy card. It looks, to be honest, kind of like a newbie card. And Zach has no idea that Collected Company is rolling around in Vince's deck. Now Vince drops down a card, and Zach has a similar advantage because he didn't show off much of his deck either. Now Temple of Mystery is going to tuck 1 card to the bottom, and Zach passes the turn back, and Vince playing a Sunpetal Grove tapped. Zach follows up with a Thespian Stage, one of the signature cards of things he needs to do, and starts off his turn with a Sylvan Scrying. Now, whether or not he wants to start with the Lotus Field plan, or if he's going to try and go for a bit more fixing, we will find out. And so will Vince. And Vince sees the Lotus Field and looks like he suddenly knows what's going on with Zach's deck. He starts pondering out his play possibilities, shuffling through his cards a little bit, and Zach decides to pass the turn back. Now, thankfully for Zach, Vince didn't have the turn 1 Elvish Mystic, but he's got a turn 2 Llanowar Elves, so that's 8 elves flying around in Vince's deck for all that juicy mana acceleration. Zach decides how he wants to start off his turn. He's got quite a grip here. He's going to take 2 from the breeding pool, comes in untapped. He's going to tap it. No, he's going to tap. He's going to do something. It's coming. Tapping 2. Alright, here we go. Floating 1 colorless mana. And he's playing out Arboreal Grazer, which is going to play the Lotus Field from his hand and chucks the Thespian Stage and the Breeding Pool. He's got 1 floating though. And that's his turn. He passes it back. Alright, that's an interesting turn. And Vince has drawn Teferi. And Teferi is pretty legit. It's going to stop Zach from doing a lot of instant speed shenanigans, but for the most part, Zach is playing on his own turn. Question is, does he want to start accelerating a little bit more? Maybe playing out another elf? Or does he want to go for the Teferi plan? Vince is kind of stalled out here. The Arboreal Grazer is going to start blocking and being able to chump block a few creatures. He needs to get down a Wildborn Preserver or a Deputy of Detention, but he's going to play out the Teferi, and Teferi is going to have a dispute, and it's a mystical dispute that counters it for 1 blue. Zach, taking his turn, untapping, playing the Botanical Sanctum, which comes into play untapped because there's less than, 3 lands when it comes into play, 2 or less. And it looks like he's got a few cards in hand. He doesn't know which one he wants to deploy first. Now, Lotus Storm is a really interesting deck because it uses synergies that you wouldn't really think of from a lot of old commons in a few sets. Like Arboreal Grazer, yeah, that was great in Standard, but who knew that its land playing ability would actually be relevant? Zach tapping 5 mana, and no, he's untapping 5 mana. He's tapping 3 mana. And he's going to play Hidden Strings. And this is a really old, weird card from Dragon's Maze of all places that says that he may untap 1 permanent and then untap up to another permanent. So he's going to be able to float 1 extra mana from the Lotus Field. And then I guess he's going to float another mana from the Botanical Sanctum. So he's got a total of 2 extra mana floating. He's going to tap for 5, 6, 7. And here comes a Finale of Devastation for 4. Wow, okay. I guess he only floated 1 extra mana from the Hidden Strings. So he's drawn 4 and refilled his hand. And now he's going to pass the turn back. Now, that wasn't technically a super explosive turn, but being able to refill his hand, and now he's got a bunch of other juicy good stuff going on. And Vince is still kind of stuck. He's played a Breeding Pool untapped, but now he needs to get some threats on the board and start applying pressure, because Zach is just going to be able to start storming off with all of his extra mana. But Vince has drawn another Teferi, and the question is that Teferi good enough, or does he want to deploy a different threat? He's got a Deputy of Detention, which will exile the Arboreal Grazer, but Vince isn't sure if he should save that for another permanent. Maybe like Wilderness Reclamation, which he may assume that Zach has in his deck. Pro tip, he doesn't. But Vince plays out Teferi, bounces the Arboreal Grazer of all things, and crashes in for nothing because he's going to tap it for a Gilded Goose instead. Zach draws for turn, and it's another Arboreal Grazer. And he's got another Lotus Field in hand. So he taps 2 mana, plays out Arboreal Grazer, plays the Lotus Field in tapped. He's got 1 floating. Is it going to be another Grazer? Does he want to... I mean, what is the harm of putting out another Grazer? And he plays out a Forest. And funny enough, he doesn't look like he has a land for turn. So he passes the turn back and... Or no, he's not passing the turn back, maybe. I mean, he's got 4 mana to go through. And Teferi is going to make it so Zach has to play everything on his own turn. And Zach is going to send his Fae of Wishes on an adventure. And he's going to dig through his sideboard and try and find something to do something. I mean, he may not like the Teferi, but Omniscience is in there, and he is pretty close to that 10 mana. But looks like he has dealt with the Wilderness Wildborn Preserver 1 time too many, and he's pulling out an Hour of Revelation and passing the turn back. Vince draws for turn, and he's got a stack of creatures, and a stack of spells, and a stack of lands. He hasn't deployed much except for a few mana dorks. Vince pluses Teferi to 2. And passes the turn back again. Maybe he's saving up mana for the Castle Ventress, or maybe he's holding up counter magic. Zach is going to tap for 6. And he's going to play Pour Over the Pages. Draw 3 cards, untap up to 2 lands, then discard a card. And in Zach's deck, he's going to be able to play that for free and then float a mana. And he draws 3 cards. He's going to have to give up 1 of them. But that's not too bad. That's nothing. Because he's got so many just strong spells, and he's giving up a Botanical Sanctum that was going to come into play tapped anyways. And now he has a Lotus Field and a Temple to go with it. He plays a Temple tapped. And now, does he want to keep it on top? Yeah, he's going to keep it on top. That's got to be scary for Vince, as Zach plays out a Growth Spiral, drawing a card, and he's going to play that Lotus Field again for that land for turn for that Growth Spiral. And now it looks like he's got even more gas to go. It's hard to tell, but it looks like he's got a Finale of Revelation in hand, which would be able to draw him up another batch of cards. And at 9 mana, it's pretty scary. But he's going to cast Fae of Wishes, bringing it into play as a nice little 1/4 blocker. Now Vince considering on how he wants to tap his mana. And it looks like he's been waiting out that Hour of Revelation, but he has to give him some juice. The Wildborn Preserver comes down, tap 3, make another food token with the goose. And now any creature that Vince plays is going to be a giant pump spell for that Wildborn Preserver. Teferi goes up to 3. He's threatening a bounce next turn, but what does he really want to bounce? He doesn't want to bounce the Fae of Wishes, because that's just gonna give the Fae of Wishes back to Summer's hand without making him discard. Crashes in with the Preserver, but the Arboreal Grazer calls his bluff, and Vince has to pass the turn back. Now Zach he's in the nice spot here, and he's getting comfy in his seat. He's got 3 Lotus Fields in play. A Thespian stage would be great, but he's not going to be greedy. Or is he? The question is, how does he want to start deploying? Like, he's under no pressure. He's got plenty of blockers. Vince is basically giving him free reign to do what he wants. And now he's going to bring back the Fae of Wishes, discarding 2 cards, and one of them is a Lotus Field. He says, no, I'm fine. I don't need that many Lotus Fields. I'm okay. But Teferi might put a damper in his plans, and it might be time to deploy that Hour of Revelation. Now, in response, Vince is going to float some mana, eating up a food token to float mana with the Gilded Goose, and Hour resolves. But it's not just a creature one, it's going to kill the other 2 food tokens, and it's going to kill Teferi. But Zax is going to the next phase, and Vince is going to cast out that Wildborn Preserver, and then use the Castle of Vantress to look at the top 2 cards, and it's Dovin's Veto and Collected Company. Now, both of those are incredibly powerful cards that Vince desperately wants to see on top, especially after he's been drawing out quite a few lands. The question is, what does he want to put there first? Does he want to put the Collected Company on top and hope to hit a Spell Queller or maybe a Reflector Mage or whatever the case may be? But unfortunately, his creatures just need to be creatures and start putting pressure on there. However, he's going to put the Dovin's Veto on top, draw it for turn, and crash in for 2 at Zach, finally getting some damage through and going down to 16. Vince playing his land for turn and passing the turn back. Now, you guys might be wondering, hey, Zach only has 3 lands in play, but those 3 lands count up to 9. And he's going to use one of them to Sylvan Scrying out for another land. And he's already used up all of his Lotus Fields, but he hasn't used up his Thespian stages. He's got 1 green mana floating, and he hasn't played his land for turn. But he could also just be really patient and let Vince have a turn to himself. Zach deciding, oh, nope, he's going to use that mana. And he's going to send his Fae on another wish-granting mission. And Vince, he doesn't want to deal with it again, and says Dovin's Veto. Now, this is a very strong play for Vince, because if Zach had if he had let Zach cast it and get the wish, he could have countered whatever Zach wished for. But Zach could have pulled it back to his hand. But Vince draws for turn, crashes in against Zach, dealing 2 damage, bringing him down to 14. And Zach says, end of turn, I'm going to make my Thespian stage another Lotus Field. And here we go, another pour over the pages, letting him float 1 mana, drawing 3 cards, discarding 2, but there's a Fae of Wishes in his future, and he's getting back to normal here. He's got a Breeding Pool, and he taps again, sending another Fae of Wishes on a mission to get something juicy from his sideboard. And unfortunately, Vince doesn't have the answer for this at the moment, but he does have a Collected Company. He could find the Spell Queller. The Spell Queller could exile the Fae of Wishes, because on the stack it is a 2-mana. Well, maybe. Nope. Instead, he finds a Deputy of Detention and a Llanowar Elves. I'm gonna have to actually look that up to see if the converted mana cost of the spell is affected by Spell Queller. However, Zach is able to dig through his sideboard, and he's got a ton of juicy targets, and one of them is a Finale of Revelation. And is he going to cast it? Oh man, it's in his hand. Vince has just shown that he is out of cards for the most part. He doesn't have a counterspell for the Fae of Wishes. Was he bluffing? Was he bluffing to just let the Finale of Revelation get got? Or maybe he has a mystical dispute. But Zach says, I'm going to tap 3, 6, 9. He's counting up his mana available. 3, No, he's going to cast the Fate of Wishes, and now he has a blocker. He's going to play the land for turn, and he's going to pass the turn back. He's getting greedy. He wants that finale of Revelation for the full 10. But could this cost him? Vince crashes in for 3. Zach blocks the 2-2, takes 1, goes down to 13. And Vince just passes the turn back. He looks dead in the water. But Zach has a mystical dispute that's kind of late. Vince asks to see the graveyard, going through what could be in there. What has he gone through so far? And Zach is wondering the same thing. He saw a Dovin's Veto. He saw a Collected Company. But he says, you know what? I gotta go for it. Tapping for 12, holding 3 open, or one blue open, and he's going to Finale of Revelation for 10. This is going to untap 5 lands, shuffle everything back into his library, and draw 10 whole new cards. And Vince is like, oh, well, jeez, I can't do that. All right, you got it, good. You got it, bro. And Zach ties the match with a game win on his side. And we are going to go on to Game 3 here in just a moment. And we are at Game 3. Zach is shuffling up. He's had to take another mulligan. His draw is just not too great today. Vince holding a few cards in hand, and one of them is a Dovin's Veto. Incredibly powerful against Zach's Lotus Storm deck. Now Zach has to make the decision as to what is going on the bottom of his library. And it looks like only one card is going underneath. Vince plays out a Hollow Fountain tap, and Zach plays out a Temple of Mystery tap, and passes the turn back. This is what Zach wants to see. He wants to see a slow start from Vince, as Vince plays out a turn 2 Elvish Mystic, and passes the turn back. It looks like Zach has a Finale of Revelation in hand, but he's going to start off with the Fate of Wishes, that nice little 1/4 that's going to act as a fine blocker to a good amount of Vince's deck. Vince plays out that Castle of Castle Vantress, and he's going with the Teferi. Teferi bouncing the fairy back into Zach's hand and drawing Vince a card. Now Zach is going to be able to start deploying a few creatures. He's got a Arboreal Grazer that's going to play him another land. Unfortunately, nope, he's going to play the Fate of Wishes one more time and pass the turn back. He needs those blockers, he decides. And Teferi goes up 1, back to 2, as Vince decides on how he wants to start off his turn. He's going to take a shot, going down to 16 with that Breeding Pool. And now he's got 5 mana available. And he's got a couple of counter spells. He's going to unload that Deputy of Detention, tapping for 3, and putting the Fate of Wishes underneath it. Now, Zach might have been a little bit too zealous playing out that Fate of Wishes as a creature first, but now's the turn for him to do stuff, because Vince has Dovin's Veto in hand, but he has no way to deploy it. Looks like Zach has drawn for turn and he's missed his land drop. But he's going to tap 2. And here's Finale of Revelation for 2. A very modest one, but Vince doesn't need white mana when he's got a Mystical Dispute that counters it for 3 for 1 blue. Vince ticking up Teferi to 3. But he's got to start putting some pressure on Zach. Although Zach missed his land drop the previous turn, and this might be the time to start getting while the getting's good. As he swings in for 2, Zach blocks 1, goes down to 19, untap, upkeep, draw. And It looks like he's not going to miss his land drop this turn because he's got a Sylvan Scrying. And now the question is, does he start going with the Lotus Field? He does. It's Lotus Field time. Now, it's not going to be as much of an acceleration because it's already turn 6. But it's still desperately needed for Zach to start getting some acceleration in there. He needs to start being able to untap his lands. He needs to start being able to get some card draw going. Plays the Lotus Field for turn, sacrificing the Breeding Pool and the Forest, which are going to be fuel for his Dig Through Time. Taps 2 mana. And he's going to cycle the Vizier, untapping that Lotus Field. And now he's got the magic number. There's 8. Taps for 3. Dig Through Time. Delving 5. But Vince has the Dovin's Veto ready to go, countering that critical Dig Through Time. Oh man. And now Zach is stuck on a land and a Hidden Strings in hand. Now, granted, Zach has a lot of card draw. He's got a lot of live plays that he can make. That Pour Through the Pages could draw him 3 critical cards that he could roll into a Finale of Revelation. But Vince pumps up Teferi again and still doesn't have a lot of pressure, but he's got to start getting in there. With Zach only at 2 cards and his card draw basically gone, Vince plays a Breeding Pool, but he's got to start getting in there. He swings in for 2, bringing Zach down to 17 as the Arboreal Grazer with that critical 3 toughness makes a block. Zach plays a Temple that goes to the bottom. An Arboreal Grazer was his draw for the turn, but it's not going to have another land. Now, that might be good to Vincent, that might be poor for Vincent. He doesn't know yet. So he's going to use Castle Vantress to scry the top 2 cards, and there is a Glacial Fortress and a Spell Queller in Vince's future. Now, Vince already has 1 Spell Queller in hand, so he may not need the second one, but he does want to be able to deploy 2 spells in a turn. He's got Deputy of Detention, which will clear the way of those Arboreal Grazers, and then he'll have Spell Queller to maybe follow up if Zach finds some kind of spell that will, 4 or less. Unfortunately, Finale of Devastation is going to be much more than 4 at this point, but Vince is confident that he needs the land drop, and he plays it out, and making sure that he's tapping correctly. He hasn't seen many tricks from Zach's side of the board, but that's because the Lotus Storm can't play instants on Vince's turn. And now Deputy of Detention tucks those 2 Arboreal Grazers underneath, and Vince is finally able to start getting in there. Vince is doing the math where he wants to, start dealing damage. He's got 2 cards in hand. Plus his Teferi. Crashes in for 2. This is going to bring Vince down to 15. Zach plays a land for turn. It's a Thespian stage, which is a great land, but he needs his card draw. He needs something to get in. He needs something to refill his hand because he's basically invested in playing out all that mana. Vince deciding he's going to go on the offense, playing out the Spell Queller, and here it comes. It's damage time. This is how the Bant Company deck wins. It gets you in there with all these tiny little weenie dudes, and Zach has an empty board, clear for the taking. Now Vince is deciding on whether or not he wants to scry first or if he wants to draw, but he's going to decide to draw regularly, and he's got a few Teferi ammunitions he's going to pop off. And he's going to minus Teferi, selecting nothing, but in response to the trigger, he's going to look at the top 2 cards. Maybe with Castle Vantress? Possibly? Yep, he's going to go for it. Top 2 with Castle Vantress. Let's see what we got up there. The top two, unfortunately, we can't see what they are. But one goes on top and one goes on bottom. That means a card that he wants is there. And it looks like it's a Mystical Dispute. Vince taking 2 life to play out a Temple Garden untapped. And he wants to hold up that blue mana in case he needs to dispute something. And he's going to crash in 4-6, bringing Zach down to 10, and then tapping 2, playing out a Selfless Spirit. That means that Zach is under incredible pressure here. He needs to get through that Spirit and a board. But he is facing down close to lethal next turn. And all he has is nothing. He draws and passes the turn back to Vince. Vince is drawn. Looks like a Curious Obsession. He's going to tap blue, holding that Castle Vantress up because he's going to need it late for later. Going to tap 5. No. He's going to tap blue, and he's going to Curious Obsession, deciding on what he wants to target because he's afraid of Zach just being able to blow out something and get 2 of his creatures back. So he wants to make it the target that is the least effective. So he Curious Obsessions the Deputy of Detention that is tucking 2 Arboreal Grazers underneath it. He's counting up the math. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, 8 damage. Zach is at 10. At this point, Zach won't be able to play an untapped Shockland. Well, it may be too little too late. But he swings in for 2, 4, 6, 7, holding the Elvish Mystic up and bringing Zach down to 3. Now, in response to the draw trigger, Vince is going to scry 2 with Castle Vantress, holding up blue and green, tapping the Elvish Mystic. I guess he wants to be able to find a Dovin's Veto. Both cards going to the bottom. They're not Dovin's Veto. And draw. Zach draws for turn. Now it's a pour over the pages that's going to allow him to draw 3 cards and untap 2 lands. He's got 1 mana floating. He's got 1 turn to storm off. Come on, Zach, what do you got? He's got a Sylvan Scrying and a Growth Spiral. Growth Spiral might find its way into a Finale of Revelation. Drawing. And it's another Sylvan Scrying. Plays the land for turn. Oof. I don't think he got there. It doesn't look like he got there. And he gives the handshake to Vince. And Vince has gone undefeated at this FNM Pioneer event. And he's going to take it all the way down, going 2-1 and taking the match. And what a FNM that was. Vince's Bant Company deck was so odd, so interesting. It wasn't like many of the lists that I've seen with it, but it definitely worked and it took down this event. So that is freaking awesome, and congratulations to Vince. But that's it for us this time. We got more Pioneer coming. We've got a Team Unified Pioneer event on the way as well, and we've got more Vintage Cube in the can. So if you want to support the content that we're doing, hit that like button, hit that notification bell, follow us on Instagram, and if you want to help support the channel, click on some of the links in the description below. But until next time, may all your packs be fat.